A young nurse got a wrong call at 1 a.m. She showed up anyway, but the single dad CEO never let her leave. It was well past midnight when Lucy Thompson finally got home. She just finished 12 hours shift on her feet, 3 codes called, 2 families she consoled, 1 life saved, and 1 lost. Her window was still ajar from the morning breeze she'd enjoyed before her shift. Now the cool, night air bit at her exposed feet, but she didn't move. Lucy didn't care. She had long ago learned the difference between comfort and necessity. Sleep, at this point, was not a luxury, it was survival. 30 minutes into a deep, dreamless sleep, her phone began to ring. At first, it was like a far-off bell, a ghostly echo weaving itself into the vague recesses of her subconscious. Then it rang again, and again, a third time, more insistent, sharp like a knife against the hush of the apartment. Lucy stirred, groaned into her pillow, and reached for the phone blindly, nearly knocking it off the nightstand. 1 a.m. Her heart sank. "Nope," she muttered, voice thick with exhaustion, and slammed the phone back down. A second later, it rang again. This time, she sat up, annoyed. Calls at this hour almost never meant good news, and they never came unless something was truly wrong. But she wasn't on call. Not tonight. Tonight was supposed to be her sanctuary, however brief. Still, the phone continued to vibrate, insistent, persistent, urgent. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy and dry. "Hello." There was a pause, an inhale. Not the kind that followed a telemarketer's delay, not the polite click of a disconnected line. A small, frightened voice whispered, barely audible over the receiver. Is this Dr. Phelps?" Lucy blinked, her frustration giving way to alertness. The voice was a child's. "A boy. I don't think so," she replied gently, her nurse's instinct rising despite her foggy state. "Who's this?" The silence on the other end was immediate and suffocating. Then, shakily, My dad fell down. He's not waking up. I tried to call the doctor. I think I got the number wrong. Please help." Lucy froze. All the residual fatigue evaporated from her body in a single exhale. She sat upright now, every sense tuned to the terror wrapped in that young boy's voice. "What's your name, sweetie?" she asked softly, trying not to let her own adrenaline seep into her tone. "Ethan," the boy choked out. "I'm 12. My mom's gone, and my dad, he won't wake up." Lucy closed her eyes briefly. Her mind had already started calculating CPR steps, signs of stroke, diabetic shock, heart failure. But first, location. "Okay, Ethan, it's going to be all right. You did the right thing calling someone, even if it was the wrong number," she said. "Can you do something very important for me?" A sniffle. "Okay. I need you to look around for anything that shows your address. A package, a letter, even something from school. Can you find something like that?" A pause. The line rustled with movement, frantic footsteps across what sounded like hardwood floors. Lucy could hear his breath, shaky and fast, but focused. A kid trying to be brave. Then, success. "There's a box here. It says 48, Willow Creek Road, Briar Hills." Lucy's breath caught. She knew Briar Hills. It was a wealthy suburb, only about 15 minutes from where she lived. She stood up immediately, already slipping out of her scrubs and into jeans and a sweater with muscle memory. "Good job, Ethan. You're doing amazing. I'm going to come there. Okay? I'll be there soon. Don't hang up until I tell you to." "Okay." She grabbed her stethoscope and a basic emergency bag from the closet. Most nurses didn't keep supplies at home, but Lucy did. Too many times she'd driven past scenes, too many instincts that wouldn't let her look away. She locked her door behind her and ran to her car, phone still pressed to her ear with one hand. "Tell me what's happening with your dad now," she said as she started the engine. He's not moving. He was coughing a lot earlier. Then he said he was dizzy. He dropped his glass. Then he just fell. I tried shaking him, but he didn't wake up. He's breathing, I think. Coughing. Dizzy. Collapse." Lucy's thoughts raced. Pneumonia? Stroke? Blood sugar crash? She kept him talking during the drive, asking about his father's age, medical conditions, medications if Ethan knew any. He's 46. He's been sad a lot lately. Since Mom died in the car crash, he doesn't go out much. Lucy's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she said gently. "You're doing so well. I'm almost there." 10 minutes later, she pulled into the quiet, gated neighborhood of Briar Hills. Grand homes loomed behind rows of trimmed hedges and iron fences. House 48 stood at the end of a circular drive, all white stone and glass, elegant but lifeless in the night. The front door was wide open. Lucy parked hastily and ran inside, not even bothering to knock. The entry hall was massive and dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. A staircase curved upward like a spine. "Ethan," she called. A boy appeared from around the corner. He had tear-streaked cheeks, messy dark hair, and the smallest frame Lucy had ever seen for someone 12. He looked both terrified and relieved at once. "Over here," he shouted, running ahead. She followed him into a sleek, modern living room where a man lay on the floor, unconscious but breathing. Lucy dropped to her knees immediately, putting her bag down. Morgan Combs. She recognized him now. Of course she did. The name was known across the city. Tech magnate, billionaire entrepreneur, and reclusive widower. None of that mattered now. She focused on his pulse, his breathing, the paleness of his lips, the heat radiating from his forehead. Fever. Shallow breaths. Weak pulse. She touched his forehead, then looked around. Water bottles, unopened. Prescriptions on the table, antibiotics for pneumonia. He'd been prescribed treatment but hadn't taken it seriously. The grief had swallowed him whole. She worked quickly, checking his airway, positioning him safely. She coached Ethan through the steps with calm clarity, getting a blanket, bringing her supplies, holding the light steady. The boy didn't flinch, didn't cry. He was locked into Lucy's presence, clinging to her steadiness like a raft in a storm. After long, tense minutes, Morgan stirred slightly. Lucy exhaled deeply and whispered, "He's going to be okay." Ethan collapsed into her arms, sobbing. That night, something shifted in Lucy. She wasn't just a nurse doing her duty. She had crossed a line that most people never dared to, into someone's most vulnerable moment. Into a child's fear, into a stranger's collapse. And she had answered a call not meant for her. Or maybe it was meant for her after all. She stayed until paramedics arrived. Gave them her observations, her notes, everything she could. She waited with Ethan until he was safely in their care. Before she left, Ethan looked up at her, eyes wide, tired, but no longer afraid. "Will you come back?" Lucy nodded. Something in her heart whispered that this story wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning at Westbridge Medical Center began in hushed tones and soft light. The usual morning clamor of beeping monitors and hurrying footsteps was muted on the top floor, where the private rooms were hidden away behind double-glass doors. The hospital was busy as always, but Lucy Thompson found herself walking slowly, as though her body instinctively knew this wasn't the kind of visit that needed rushing. She hadn't slept much. After returning home from the emergency at Morgan Combs' estate, her body had ached with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't rest. She'd stared at the ceiling long after sunrise, thinking about the way Ethan had trembled on the phone, the stark coldness of the mansion, the way Morgan had lain there. Fragile, pale, and dangerously close to a breaking point. She wasn't just thinking about a patient anymore. Room 213 stood near the end of the hallway, its door closed. She paused just outside, pressing her palm briefly to the cool metal. A breath. In and out. This wasn't her usual kind of check-in. She knocked softly. The door opened before she could reach the handle. "Lucy." Ethan's face appeared, brighter than she'd seen it before. His hair was still a tangle, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness, but there was a spark, a shift from fear to relief. He threw himself into her arms, unfiltered, raw. "You came back," he said, the words muffled against her sweater. "I told you I would," she said, smoothing a hand over his hair. He took her hand and led her inside without letting go. The private suite was calm and sunlit, the curtains drawn wide to let in the soft warmth of late morning. A quiet hum of machines was the only sound. Morgan sat up in bed, and four still clipped to his arm, oxygen tube gone. He was shaved now, his hair brushed back, his posture no longer collapsed but controlled. Still, his face held a stiffness she recognized, not from illness, but from shame. "Morning," she said gently. He nodded, almost formal. "Lucy, thank you for yesterday." "No need," she replied, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" He glanced toward the window. "More human than I did last night. Small steps are still steps." His lips curved faintly at that. "Your shift started already?" "Started, paused, and now I'm here. I needed to check in." "Hospital policy or personal choice?" "Both," she said. but mostly personal. Morgan looked away, throat working like he wanted to speak but wasn't sure how. Ethan clambered back into the chair beside the bed, picking up a coloring book that sat unopened on the tray. "You saved his world last night," Morgan said suddenly, still not looking at her. Lucy's eyes met his, direct. "He saved yours too," calling that number. It was a wrong number. It was the right one for that moment. He let out a short breath. "Do you always talk like that?" "Only when it's true." A silence followed, not uncomfortable, just full of all the things that didn't need to be rushed. "I used to read to Claire in the mornings," Morgan said suddenly, voice lower. "When she was sick, I'd bring her tea, and she'd make me sit by the window while she looked outside. That was her favorite kind of light, what you see right now." Lucy didn't interrupt. His eyes had clouded over, but his voice stayed steady. "She died 6 months ago. Car accident. Daylight. She was driving back from an event she organized, ironically, about road safety." His jaw tightened. "I was supposed to be there, but I stayed behind to finish a call. Told her I'd catch up later." Lucy pulled the visitor's chair closer, sat beside him, and folded her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry. I know people say that a lot. I just don't know what to do with it anymore." "You don't have to do anything," she replied. "Sometimes grief just wants company, not a cure." He finally looked at her then. His eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but beneath it, a glimmer of something else. Recognition. Understanding. "My sister died of cancer," she said. "I took care of her till the end. Watching her fade, it changes something in you." "How long ago?" 2 years, she said. "And still, there are mornings I reach for my phone to text her. I don't even realize it until I'm staring at an empty screen." Morgan swallowed. "So you know?" "I do." Another pause. This one deeper. She could see the tension in his hands, the need to hold it all in. It was a pattern she'd seen so many times, especially in men like him. CEOs, public figures, fathers. People who were supposed to hold everything together. "Ethan," Morgan said after a beat, glancing at his son. "He's been trying so hard. I shut him out more than I want to admit." "He still called," Lucy said. "He trusted someone would come." Morgan nodded slowly. "That's what scares me. That he still has hope. That he believes in people. That's not something to fear," she said. "It's something to follow." Ethan, having quietly listened without them noticing, looked up from his chair. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Lucy smiled and turned to Morgan, waiting for him to answer. The silence between them stretched for just a moment longer than necessary. "If she wants to," Morgan said finally. "I want to," Lucy replied. "Can we bring cards next time?" Ethan asked. "Only if you let me win at least one game," she teased. Morgan chuckled softly, a sound so faint it felt like a whisper of who he might have been before grief hollowed him out. That sound, Lucy thought, might be the most honest thing she'd heard all day. She stood and reached for her bag. "I've got to get back to rounds," she said. "But I'll check in tomorrow." Morgan nodded. "You've done more than you know." As she reached the door, he added, more quietly, "Most people see the patient. You saw the man." She turned back. "Because I've been both." Then she left, letting the soft click of the door mark the end of a conversation that wasn't truly over. Not yet. Inside the room, Morgan looked at Ethan. The boy was still coloring, the tip of his tongue caught between his teeth in deep focus. "Do you like her?" Ethan asked suddenly. Morgan blinked. "What do you mean?" "She listens. You smile more when she's here." Morgan hesitated, then reached out and ruffled his son's hair. "Yeah," he said. "I like her. She likes you too." Ethan said with the simple confidence only a child could carry. "And me?" Morgan leaned back in the bed and stared at the window. The light had shifted just slightly, warmer now. "Maybe we all got lucky with the wrong number," he murmured. Ethan didn't respond. He just kept coloring. And for the first time in half a year, the room didn't feel like a waiting place for pain. It felt like the start of something. The days that followed Lucy's visit to room 213 folded gently into one another, like pages in a slowly unfolding story neither she nor Morgan expected to write. At first, her return was casual, wrapped in the loose cover of professional obligation. She arrived with charts, asked routine questions, checked vitals. She wore her badge, carried a clipboard, and told herself this was just another patient checkup. But Morgan saw through it. And deep down, Lucy knew he did. What surprised her most wasn't his quiet acceptance, but the warmth with which Ethan greeted her every time. That boy had latched onto her like a vine to sunlight. Whether she arrived in the morning or near dusk, his face would brighten instantly, his feet pounding down the hallway to greet her with a hug or breathless updates about their day. Morgan made toast. He'd say one day, "Dad actually shaved today," another. They became little victories, tiny beacons lighting the long hallway of grief the two Combs men were slowly walking down. Lucy's professional visits began to evolve. After the third or fourth day, the stethoscope stayed in her bag. She no longer checked Morgan's heart rate, but found herself watching him more carefully, how he sat straighter, how he responded quicker to Ethan, how a quiet vitality had begun to return to his voice. One Friday morning, she arrived just as sunlight was streaking through the kitchen's tall glass windows. The house, once cold and still, was slowly coming alive. She found Ethan standing on a chair in front of the stove, wielding a spatula with dramatic flair. "Pancakes today," he declared. "Chef Ethan's special." Morgan leaned against the marble island, his arms crossed, looking amused and exasperated all at once. When Lucy entered, his expression softened. "You're just in time for a breakfast disaster," he said. "Smells more like burnt sugar," she teased, setting her bag down. "Minor casualty," Ethan said proudly, flipping a pancake with more confidence than technique. That morning, they sat together. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't awkward. Lucy took a seat beside Morgan, accepting the coffee he poured without asking how she took it. He remembered. It struck her more than it should have. From then on, the rhythm settled. Lucy began dropping by more often, and the pretense of duty faded. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a visitor, a friend, and, though unspoken, a kind of anchor the house hadn't had in months. Afternoons passed like soft films. Lucy helping Ethan with his math homework while Morgan sorted through the neglected stack of foundation documents in the study. Ethan, growing bolder by the day, often roped her into the kitchen. He wanted to bake cookies, then muffins, then a full cake. Most of the time, they failed spectacularly. One afternoon, Lucy emerged from a flour-dusted battlefield of a kitchen, laughing with her hands white as snow. Morgan watched them from the living room doorway. Ethan shouted something about baking being a scientific art, while Lucy wagged a wooden spoon at him in mock outrage. Morgan didn't speak. He just smiled. A real smile, not the polite curve of his lips he'd learned to perform in boardrooms. It was quiet, subtle, but it held something she hadn't seen before. Contentment. And something else. A kind of longing. In the evenings, Lucy often stayed after Ethan had gone to bed. She and Morgan would move to the back porch, the air cooler under the stars. They sat on the same old bench, always close but never quite touching. Their conversations wandered, sometimes funny, sometimes heavy. They spoke of childhoods, of regrets, of old scars that hadn't healed. Morgan talked about Claire occasionally. At first, in broken fragments, but over time, in fuller memories. How she laughed at his terrible singing, how she never learned to drive in reverse, how she danced barefoot in their kitchen after Sunday dinners. Lucy listened, always with the patience and empathy of someone who had known her own losses. In turn, Lucy shared stories from the ER, some hopeful, some grim, all told with the soft inflection of someone who had learned not to let the weight of death extinguish her light. As the days passed, Morgan began to change in small, but unmistakable ways. He answered emails again, took calls about his nonprofit. He even returned to managing Claire's road safety initiative, drafting a campaign proposal one afternoon with Lucy's quiet encouragement. He stopped letting the silence win. And Lucy? She felt herself drawn more and more into this quiet world of second chances. She found comfort in their new rituals: Friday pancake mornings, Tuesday homework help, Sunday porch talks. The lines had blurred between care and companionship, and she no longer wanted to define them. One night, everything slowed. Ethan had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house, his first since Claire's death. Morgan, anxious but willing, let him go, promising to keep his phone close. Lucy offered to stay a while, just to help him feel less alone. Morgan cooked that evening. It wasn't gourmet, grilled chicken, a simple salad, pasta lightly buttered, but it was meaningful. They ate at the long dining table where she'd once organized Ethan's crayons, now cleared for real conversation. They talked about books, movies, rainstorms. "I miss thunderstorms," Lucy said. "The kind that make the world stop for a moment." "I always hated them," Morgan replied. "Until Claire danced in one once. Barefoot, in a white dress. She made it look like poetry." Lucy smiled. "Sounds like she did that a lot." He nodded. "Every day?" Later, while they were cleaning up, their hands brushed over a plate. Neither moved. A second passed. Then two. There was something sharp in the air, tension, surprise, curiosity. Their eyes met. Then both pulled away. He cleared his throat. She reached for a dish towel. "Sorry," he said. "No need," she replied. But something had shifted. Afterward, they returned to the porch. They sat in silence. The stars stretched above them in a quiet sprawl. Somewhere inside, a clock ticked, but time felt suspended. From the upstairs window, Ethan watched them through a slit in the curtain. He didn't say anything, didn't move. He smiled to himself and returned to bed. He didn't know how to name what was happening, but he knew enough to feel it. Something good was growing. The late morning sun filtered through the windshield as Lucy sat in the passenger seat of Morgan's SUV, glancing out at the spring green horizon. In the back seat, Ethan leaned forward between them, excitement humming in every syllable of his voice. "Mom used to love the hydrangeas," he said, eyes wide. "And the bluebells. She'd always say they looked like little fairy hats." Morgan smiled faintly. She did. They were headed to the botanical gardens just outside the city. It had been Ethan's idea. He'd brought it up over breakfast the morning before, almost casually, as though it hadn't taken him weeks to work up the courage to mention it. "I think Mom would like it if we all went," he'd said. "You know, together." Morgan had looked up from his coffee, brows raised, then cast a quiet glance toward Lucy. She hadn't spoken at first, just offered Ethan a small smile, the kind that said yes without needing words. And now here they were. A day that felt like a line drawn between the past and whatever came next. The entrance to the garden stood like a painted gateway, wrought iron wrapped in ivy, stone steps leading into a sanctuary of color and scent. Lucy stepped out first, greeted by the sweet breath of lilacs drifting on the breeze. Ethan was already bounding ahead, his excitement bubbling into shouts of, "Come on, it's this way." Morgan lingered beside her, hands in his pockets. "I haven't been here since," he trailed off. "You don't have to finish that," she said gently. "I understand." They began walking slowly, their steps in sync without effort. The garden unfolded around them in bursts of gentle wonder, lavender paths, golden daffodils, tulips swaying in neat rows like dancers in colorful skirts. Ethan darted between the sections, pointing at plaques and exclaiming facts he remembered from past visits with Claire. "He's memorized everything," Morgan murmured. "Like if he remembers enough of her favorites, she won't ever really leave." Lucy didn't speak. Instead, she gently touched his arm. He didn't flinch. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the air fragrant and full of bird call. Then Lucy asked, "Do you come here often?" He shook his head. "Not since she passed. I couldn't. Everything about this place. It felt too alive when I felt dead." They passed beneath an arch of flowering wisteria, the petals casting lavender shadows on their faces. Lucy watched the sunlight flicker across his profile, the man who had collapsed under the weight of grief now beginning to carry it differently. "You look better," she said. "You carry yourself lighter." "I've been trying to," he replied, his voice low. "Or maybe it's because of you." She blinked at that, caught off guard. "Me? I was numb for so long, Lucy. Not just sad. I mean truly nothing. Like the world was in black and white, and I'd forgotten what color felt like." He stopped walking and turned to her. His eyes were vulnerable, unguarded in a way that made her throat tighten. "And then you showed up, at 1 a.m, like a thunderstorm." She smiled, embarrassed. "I hope not the destructive kind." "No," he said, voice soft. "The kind that wakes you up." The words settled between them like pollen in the air, gentle, inescapable. Lucy looked away first, grounding herself in the nearby garden beds. "I've been afraid to feel anything too," she admitted. "Losing someone changes you. It teaches you that love can be ripped away in a moment, that nothing is promised." Morgan nodded. "But maybe that's exactly why it matters more when it comes again." They resumed walking. Ethan had disappeared around a bend, no doubt toward the rose maze. The path curved beneath an arch of white dogwood trees, and just beyond it, a wooden bench waited beneath the shade. It was tucked into a quiet alcove, half hidden behind a cluster of soft-blooming cherry blossoms. A small plaque on the bench read, "In memory of love that grows." Morgan gestured toward it. "Sit." She nodded. They sat without speaking for a while. The petals fell around them like confetti in slow motion. A breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle, wrapping them in quiet sweetness. Lucy tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Did you ever think you'd get another chance at this? At happiness? No, he said honestly. I didn't even want one. I thought it would be betrayal. To Claire. To what we had, he clarified. But now I realize. Claire wouldn't have wanted me to stay stuck. She would have wanted me to raise Ethan with joy, with light. And she would have wanted someone like you. The confession landed like a gentle ripple across her chest. She wanted to look away but didn't. Couldn't. Morgan shifted closer, just slightly. I'm not saying I'm ready for everything. But I feel something again, Lucy. With you. Her breath caught. She met his eyes, searching. They were soft, honest, hopeful, but not demanding. He was letting her choose. I feel it too, she whispered. But I'm scared. So am I. A pause. But maybe, he added, we can be scared together. The next moment unfolded slowly. Morgan leaned in, hesitating just long enough for Lucy to meet him halfway. He pecked her. They parted only slightly, foreheads brushing. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. A soft rustle nearby made Lucy glance over her shoulder. Ethan stood a few paces away, pretending not to have seen. But his small, knowing smile gave him away. He didn't run up, didn't tease. He simply turned and continued down the path, his hands behind his back, content. Back on the bench, Morgan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Lucy leaned against his shoulder, watching the cherry blossoms fall. And for the first time since that terrible night months ago, the world felt like it might offer more than just survival. It might offer something like peace, or even love. It had been nearly 2 months since Lucy first stepped foot into the silent halls of the Combs estate in the middle of the night. That house, once chilled by grief and heavy with absence, had changed. Flowers now lined the windowsills, freshly cut and arranged by Lucy and Ethan every Sunday. Light music filtered through the rooms during the evenings, and laughter had become a new kind of furniture, always present, always warm. Morgan had returned to work 2 weeks ago, not all at once, but in small, intentional steps. He began checking in with his executive team, overseeing foundation projects, even attending virtual board meetings from his study, which he now shared with Ethan on homework nights. But one thing never changed. He kept his evenings open. No matter how many deals waited on his signature, or how many documents filled his inbox, he never missed dinner with Lucy and Ethan. It became their sacred ritual, shared meals, storytelling, games, even quiet nights just watching old movies together. Lucy had stopped calling it visiting. She was part of their rhythm now, and the space she filled was no longer temporary. What she didn't know was that Morgan had been planning something. It began with whispers between father and son, quiet laughter behind closed doors, and late-night Amazon packages that arrived wrapped in secrecy. Ethan had even borrowed Lucy's measuring tape once under the excuse of a school project, but his grin had given him away. By the time the evening arrived, the sun was already casting a golden haze over the estate. Lucy pulled into the driveway wearing a soft burgundy dress, nothing extravagant, just enough to show she'd sensed something was different about tonight. There had been no agenda. Morgan had simply asked, "Will you have dinner with us on the rooftop tonight?" The rooftop. Claire had loved that space. It had once been her garden escape. Lined with potted vines, low lanterns, and a panoramic view of the city skyline. After her passing, Morgan had locked the doors to that level. It had become a place too sacred to visit, too painful to see emptied of her presence. Until now. Lucy ascended the stairs slowly, following the sound of soft jazz and the scent of grilled vegetables and rosemary. When she stepped onto the rooftop, she stopped in place. The scene before her was breathtaking. Strings of warm fairy lights crisscrossed overhead, glowing against the twilight. A long table draped in cream linen sat in the center, set for 3. Candles flickered in glass holders, and a few rose petals lay scattered across the surface like little whispers of celebration. At the far end stood Ethan, dressed in a miniature tuxedo, a folded napkin over one arm. "Good evening, Miss Lucy," he said in a grand voice. "Your table is ready." She burst into laughter, her hand covering her mouth. "You look very professional." "I was trained by the best," he said, gesturing dramatically to Morgan, who stepped out from behind a row of plants, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, his shirt collar open. He looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, and more nervous. "You like it?" he asked, walking toward her. I love it, she said, stunned. You did all this? Well, Ethan and I make a great team, he said, casting a glance toward his son, who was now pretending to inspect the candles with a very serious air. But yes, we wanted tonight to be special. He offered her his arm. She took it. They sat together, sharing a meal that tasted like more than just good cooking. It was filled with laughter, mostly thanks to Ethan, who took his job as waiter extremely seriously, down to describing each dish in comically exaggerated detail. This, he said of the dessert, is a delicate vanilla bean custard with fresh berries, hand-selected by a very grumpy cashier. Lucy snorted into her spoon. When the plates were cleared and Ethan excused himself to check inventory, the rooftop grew quiet. The city lights below shimmered like fireflies, and the air was soft with late spring warmth. Morgan leaned back in his chair, watching her. I've been thinking about something, he said, voice steady. Lucy turned to him, sensing the shift. Do you remember the night you got that call? 1 a.m. How could I forget? She replied softly. I almost didn't survive that night. Not just physically. I was done. Ethan had lost one parent. I couldn't be what he needed. I was slipping, Lucy, and I didn't even see it happening. She reached out, her fingers brushing his. But then, he continued, you answered. A complete stranger, exhausted from work, could have let it ring. But you didn't. You listened to his voice. You came. And that one decision changed everything. He stood then, slowly, with one hand dipping into his jacket pocket. Lucy's heart stuttered. I kept thinking, what are the odds? A wrong number at the right time. A woman I didn't know becoming the person I trust most. Someone who helped me come back to life, who helped Ethan laugh again, who filled our home with light. Her eyes welled. I don't want to imagine this house without your laughter anymore. Or dinner without your voice. I don't want a single morning where I don't know if you're coming back. He lowered to one knee. From the shadows, Ethan gasped, then ducked quickly behind a planter, peeking out with wide, glowing eyes. Morgan opened a small, velvet box. Lucy Thompson, he said, his voice shaking, will you marry me? Will you be the heart of our home? Will you be ours, mine and Ethan's, forever? Lucy covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling freely now. She hadn't expected this, not tonight. And yet, it made perfect sense. Every moment had led here. She nodded, choked up. Then, finally, yes, she whispered. Then louder, laughing through her tears, yes. Morgan stood, slipping the ring on her finger. It was simple, elegant, and perfect. Before they could embrace, Ethan burst from his hiding place and barreled into them both, throwing his arms around their waists. We're a real family now, he shouted, voice high with joy. They laughed, all three wrapped together in a tangle of arms and warmth and tears. Overhead, the stars flickered into view, quiet witnesses to a promise made not with fireworks or crowds, but with soft candlelight, an open sky, and the healing power of a second chance. The sun filtered through the tall oaks that bordered the Combs estate, casting a honey-gold glow across the garden that had been transformed into a sanctuary of joy. Flowers bloomed in soft pinks and whites, their delicate fragrance carried on the breeze, mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. The garden, once too quiet and heavy with memories, now pulsed with new life. Chairs lined the grass, all facing a vine-wrapped arbor. Guests filled them slowly, friends, close colleagues, neighbors, and a few who had walked through grief alongside Morgan and Ethan and now watched, smiling, as something sacred unfolded before them. Morgan stood at the altar in a navy suit, clean and timeless, his hands clasped in front of him. He didn't shift his weight or fidget. He stood steady, his eyes never straying from the garden path ahead. His heart was steady too, but full, almost aching with the quiet anticipation of a man who knew he was about to step into the rest of his life. Beside him, Ethan bounced on the balls of his feet, trying hard to be still and grown-up but clearly barely holding in his joy. His tie was slightly crooked. His shoes were a size too large. I'll grow into them, he'd insisted. In his pocket, he held the rings, touching them every few seconds like a secret. She's coming, he whispered, peeking down the aisle. Dad, look, she's coming. The music shifted. Every head turned. At the end of the aisle, framed by sunlight and rose petals, stood Lucy. She wore a simple, elegant dress, soft ivory silk that hugged her gently and swayed with the breeze. Her hair was pinned loosely, strands falling around her face, and in her eyes was a quiet glow that made every other light seem dim. But she wasn't walking alone. Ethan had insisted on escorting her. And so he did, one hand in hers, the other held to his chest, like a tiny knight leading his queen. His chest was proud, his steps precise, and his eyes focused straight ahead on Morgan, who, like everyone else, couldn't look away from Lucy. Each step brought her closer. Not just to a man, but to a life neither of them had imagined at the start. A life born not from perfect timing, but from timing so wrong it had become right. When they reached the altar, Morgan stepped forward and took her hands. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. Lucy smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "So are you." The ceremony began, but it was the vows that carried the weight of everything they had been through. Morgan turned to Lucy and said, "I once believed my story had already ended. That after Claire, there was nothing left for me but to exist. I thought I could survive on memories. Then you came. Unexpected, uninvited, absolutely necessary. You brought color back into our world. You made Ethan laugh again. You taught me to feel again. I vow to show up every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because loving you is the best decision I've ever made." Lucy's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "I thought I'd already lived the part of my life where I'd feel whole. Then I met a scared little boy and his father, heartbroken, barely holding it together. And everything changed. You gave me purpose, a family, a place where I wasn't just useful, but loved. I vow to be your home, your partner, your peace. For you, for Ethan, for all the life we still have left to live." Tears traced quiet paths down the cheeks of more than one guest. When Ethan stepped forward with the rings, he handed them over with the care of a boy holding the world's most precious treasures. Morgan slipped one onto Lucy's finger, then she onto his. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said. They didn't hesitate. Morgan leaned in and kissed Lucy gently, a kiss layered with everything unsaid and everything felt. Around them, guests clapped and cheered, but none louder than Ethan. "We're a real family now," he yelled, raising his arms in the air. The crowd laughed, but not at him. They laughed with the kind of joy that fills the chest and doesn't let go. The kind that, for some people in that garden, reminded them of how love can find its way back. Later, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the fairy lights blinked to life overhead, the reception became a celebration. They danced beneath the stars, Lucy in Morgan's arms, Ethan darting between tables, collecting hugs and extra slices of cake. The air was filled with clinking glasses, soft music, and laughter so free it seemed to float. But the story didn't end there. Over time, their life together settled into a new rhythm, unremarkable to anyone outside their home, but everything to those within it. One photo told the story best. It sat on the mantel of the fireplace, framed in walnut wood. In it, Lucy, Morgan, and Ethan stood in a golden field, laughing, Lucy holding Ethan's hand, Morgan's arm around her shoulders. Beneath it, in engraved script, "Our family." Life for them became a montage of quiet joys. Lucy returned to nursing part-time, choosing days that let her pick Ethan up from school. She no longer poured herself into work to outrun her grief. She didn't have to. She was no longer running. Morgan shifted his focus to his foundation. He spoke at road safety events, dedicated parks and playgrounds to Claire's memory, and always made time for family dinners. Ethan flourished. He joined a soccer team, painted watercolors of their garden, and asked questions far beyond his years. One day he came home from school, proud of an essay he'd written called "The Day My Life Got Saved by a Wrong Number." They traveled to the mountains in autumn, where Ethan tossed leaves at Morgan and Lucy until they were buried in laughter. To a quiet village in Italy, where Lucy and Morgan danced in the street as a guitarist played nearby. To the beach, Ethan's favorite, where bonfires crackled and marshmallows melted between sticky fingers. Not every day was perfect. There were hard moments. Lucy sometimes still cried when she passed her sister's favorite cafe. Morgan still found himself staring at the photo of Claire on the upstairs bookshelf, silently thanking her for their time together. Grief never left. It simply became softer, something folded into the corners of their happiness. One night, as Lucy tucked Ethan into bed, he reached up and took her hand. "Do you think Mom sees us?" he asked. Lucy hesitated, then smiled gently. "I think she sees everything that matters." He nodded, sleepy. "She'd like you." Tears pricked her eyes. "I hope so." I know so, he said, eyes already closing. Downstairs, Morgan waited on the porch with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and pulled the blanket over their legs as she curled beside him on the swing. The stars stretched above them in soft constellations. Think we'll ever tell people how it all started? Lucy asked, teasing. A wrong number? Morgan said with a grin. No one would believe us. She laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. I didn't know I could be this happy again, she said softly. He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand and held it. Inside the house, quiet laughter echoed from the hallway where Ethan had just knocked over a basket of Legos. The kind of chaos they wouldn't trade for anything. And as the scene faded, Lucy's voice rose softly over the memory of their journey. Simple, honest, true. Sometimes, life finds you when you least expect it. All it takes is one wrong number. If you enjoyed the story of Lucy, Morgan, and Ethan, their journey from heartbreak to healing, from strangers to family, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt story. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you feel about how it all ended? What moments stood out most to you? Drop your comments below and tell us where you're watching from. Were you rooting for Lucy from the start? Did Morgan's transformation move you? Was Ethan your favorite part? And most importantly, rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Your feedback means the world to us.